Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info. At this year's Latitude Festival, interdisciplinary theatre company Clod Ensemble will present a special festival edit of its new show On the High Road, which will be directed by Suzy Willson with music composed by Paul Clark, who between them formed the company in 1995. I spoke to Suzy and Paul a week before Latitude was due to open, and I asked them, first of all, who Clod Ensemble are.
Paul and I are artistic directors of Clod Ensemble. It's called Clod Ensemble not because there's a permanent ensemble, but because the way of making performance work is an ensemble process. So the company changes from project to project, but in most of our productions we're working with people who have worked with us over years. So on the High Road, for example, one of the women in the company did our second ever production, which was in 1996. There's another member of the company who's been in our last 5 shows, and then there's some complete newcomers. Yeah. So it's a kind of way of working rather than a permanent ensemble.
But you two are the main continuing factor throughout the last 22 years, is it now?
I think it might be, yeah.
So it does all the visuals, and I do all the sound and music.
So this new production that you're taking to Latitude on the High Road, what's this one all about?
It was a idea that we had. That's been brewing for a while. We've discovered a short play by Chekhov called On the High Road, which is not very well known. It's quite a kind of flawed piece, not very regularly performed. But the mise en scène of the play is very interesting. So there's a group of people who are stuck in an inn on the high road in the middle of a storm. So in the original Chekhov, there's a group of disparate people in the pub, people who have been there for a long time, and also people who are kind of stopping on their way in the middle of a holy pilgrimage. So in our piece, we've just taken the basic idea of there being a place, and it's quite abstracted in our piece, a place which is in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a storm. And in this place, there are people who seem to have lived there for a long time, and then 3 new people enter. And they are clearly kind of devotional people. And so what we see is how the group then responds to these newcomers. So really the piece as a whole is thinking about how do groups of people negotiate space, and all of them are starting off asleep. So throughout the night, various things happen. They pray, the pilgrims pray, then they kind of wake, there's a big storm, big thunder waking them up. They go through a kind of party sequence. They fight, arguments and tensions kind of brew. So I suppose the way we look at it is as a moving picture or a moving drawing. The set is a brilliant white set, and they're all wearing black. So it's like a line drawing. Difficult to describe.
The one other thing to say is that in this piece there's no words. Right. So it's much more. I mean, we don't call it a dance piece exactly, but it's in that sort of dance theatre land. And
drawing also, I think what's recognisable is there's quite a kind of turn of the 20th century feel about it. So a lot of the kind of images that we've been drawing on are kind of Russian constructivist images. We're kind of very influenced by Meyerhold, that kind of early physical theatre, visual art, dance theatre. That's quite a strong reference in it. And there is a kind of section also which also references a kind of Weimar kind of cabaret mood. So it's very much about the kind of betwixt in between, I suppose, at that period in history, people finding themselves between 2 wars. And there's something that feels the kind of mood that we find ourselves in now seems to have a relationship to that period somehow.
It sounds like something with a very Eastern European, probably from that period that you were saying, mainly influence. I know you've been influenced by people like Gogol and Pushkin in the past. Physical theatre isn't really anything new if you draw it back to Meyerhold, really, is it?
Exactly. I mean, I studied with Jacques Lecoq, and there was definitely, linking back to that theatre tradition is something that I have a great, I've always been inspired by. And I suppose for us now is where that meets dance is interesting. And the group of performers that we're working with are amazing dancers. They also have the capacity to kind of
inhabit a character.
Yeah, inhabit a kind of a character in a world. So the piece, you could watch it as a, focusing on the group of people. You could also watch it as a kind of abstract dance piece or as a kind of moving painting. The form is, I think, quite an unusual form. It's not quite theatre, not quite dance, not quite performance art. So I think that's something that's exciting about it. And the score is kind of underpinning the whole thing.
But it sounds like you've got a political message in there. So how do you put across? I know companies like, certainly you have been trying to do that for a number of years, and companies like Deviate, they've been experimenting with political theatre through dance and physical theatre. But how do you get that message across without words, with just movement and music?
It's not really a didactic piece, I'd say. It's all kind of working on a metaphorical kind of level, the way that we don't expect to be able to pin down and nail down political points in a visual way.
But it's certainly the themes of difference and otherness and sharing space and refuge. They're all in there.
Yeah.
But it's kind of open, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely the central image of people starting from an image where everyone is asleep. For me, that's pretty obviously about our times now, how we kind of slept-walked into lots of political trouble. But I can easily imagine that other audience members would read it in a different way.
Yeah. It's more ambiguous. So how is your music influenced then, Paul? We've heard the literary influences, but where do your musical influences come from to fit with that?
I think like a lot of people from my generation and younger, we're pretty eclectic in our taste and listen to all sorts of music. It's not. I mean, I was raised on classical music, really, I suppose, but in terms of my training, but it was always listening to other music from around the world and from Western world, but different, like jazz and pop music, hip hop, and all everything really. And so it's finding. I mean, one of the great things about having your own company is that you can kind of create a bespoke sound for each piece and develop it slowly. And so that's the case here as well. It's got its own sort of blend, which we've been working on the piece for a long time. So I've kind of created a massive load of samples made out of weather sounds, because there's a lot of weather themes going on, and created rhythms out of that sampled material. But there is some Eastern Europe influence in a couple of places, actually, and also songs from the idea of different people walking into this house who are all from different places. I've written 3 songs which people sing, which are really different to each other. One's more of a cabaret number, one's like some sort of difficult to pin down folk song sung by a brilliant folk singer called Thomas McCarthy, and another one which is a really sparse, delicate song sung by Melanie Pappenheim, who is in this version at Latitude is in recorded form. This is our festival edit, so she's not on stage, but you hear her voice. So it's pretty it's very diffuse in its influences, but comes together to create a particular sound.
And I think in the piece as a whole, there's a lot of tension in the piece, and I think back to kind of our times, there's also quite a lot of fear in the piece. In the middle of the night, all the kind of terrors come out, and I think the songs really cut through that and kind of also create a space of contemplation and almost kind of a space where you can kind of begin to process some of that horror, I think, which we've been kind of witnessing from a slightly different perspective, perhaps, than we have been in the past.
Yeah.
So we've heard that one of your singers is recorded, but how else has this been made into a festival edit? What else have you had to do to shape it for Latitude?
There's certain passages. Well, one of the songs we wanted to be longer, but then we went over the cabaret song. We wanted to make that scene. Well, we will make that scene longer in the final version, but we tried to keep it to 45 minutes max.
We basically want to reach as many people as possible as Latitude. We haven't performed in a festival of this kind before, so we're going to do 2 performances, and in order to do that, we've had to edit it also because of the technical restraints of a festival environment. There's kind of elements of the full version which we can't do. So in next year when we do the full version, there'll be also kind of an additional chorus of people. The lighting will be slightly different. So it's a brilliant opportunity for us to put the kind of core of the piece to the audience at Latitude. But yeah, there's certainly they will be able to come back for more the following year, we hope.
It's an interesting audience to play for theatrical. I know you've played in many different, very diverse venues, non-theatrical venues as well as theatres. But it's an audience that they sort of capture, but not. They can wander off and just go to something else at any moment, can't they? You've got to grab them, I suppose, have you?
Well, I think we're hoping that the piece is pretty compelling to watch. It's quite an intense kind of 45-minute experience, so we're hoping that we'll keep them there.
Yeah. But it is our first show, so we'll wait and see. I'm sure there'll be plenty to learn for us from doing it.
As long as if they leave, they don't open a door and let loads of light from outside in.
Yes. It depends what time of the day you're playing and what the weather's like, I suppose. But I didn't see many people wandering out of the theatre tent last year during performances, so I think you should be okay. You describe yourself as a multidisciplinary performance. What does that actually mean in practice? Because you're a director and choreographer and composer, so what else do you bring to that?
Well, I suppose, yes, the kind of basic form is this collaboration between music and movement, and, we call them kind of disciplines, but that's kind of quite broad. I think just in terms of our broader frame of reference, in terms of making pieces, we're often drawing on conversations with science, medics. We do a lot of work in medicine.
Yeah.
Most of our work visually is based on paintings and photographs. It's not just about us in terms of the multidisciplinary thing. Suzy's visual, my music background is also the performers that we work with. A typical piece of ours, for example, something like Red Ladies, had an R&B drummer, a violinist, 3 or 4 independent artists who make their own work, some dancers, some actors, a physical comedian. So we're quite happy to work with performers with really, really different backgrounds and bring them together on the same stage.
And I think across the company as a whole, Clod Ensemble has this performance program. We also do a project called Performing Medicine, which does a lot of work with doctors and healthcare professionals using techniques found in the arts, in dance, in visual art, in theatre. So I think we're influenced by many different disciplines. Also, most of our work has a kind of always an awareness because of the Performing Medicine program, kind of primarily, but we always think about a kind of broader context and give a chance for some of the research and the themes within the pieces to kind of develop in ways of their own. So, for example, we're doing our production of Under Glass, which is about how we look at things. All the performers are in glass jars and test tubes, and we're doing that in the autumn. And in parallel with that, there's a whole lot of events which are about medical objects, which are about how we see the body and about anatomy. And likewise, when we do on the high road, eventually, there are lots of issues within it around
built environment.
The relationship between us, the built environment, and our health, and all of the kind of public health, international health issues that come about because of climate change and the storm and the refuge and all of that. So within our performances, even though they're quite abstract, there's a lot of research underneath them which draws from lots of different disciplines, and we're more and more finding ways to give those conversations a life of their own beyond the performance itself.
Yeah, there's a solid scientific basis behind it, in fact.
Yeah. I mean,
maybe not a scientific basis, but
philosophy of science.
Yeah, it's not a basis. It's just one. That's one strand of inquiry, if you like. It's not kind of I wouldn't say any of our pieces are based on scientific research, but we might have done some. Not sort of, what? It's not. That's just an angle that we might have used at some point in the making of the piece.
So with you having all of these different influences, different disciplines, different kinds of performers, where do you start creating a Clod Ensemble show? Do you start with an idea, or do you start with the people and the skills that they've got?
I think it depends from piece to piece. With On the High Road, it was from the Chekhov piece that kind of sparked the idea. With Under Glass, it started from a kind of feeling, I suppose, of watching, thinking about how we look and exploring that.
Also, with that piece, it started off just as a 7-minute miniature piece that we did at the festival, and it was a sort of an idea which we weren't thinking necessarily we would still be touring sort of 9 years later. It just sort of grew. The idea seemed to spawn more ideas.
With a piece like The Silver Swan that we did at the Tate, that started with the music that Paul wrote, and then the kind of choreography came after that. And then a new piece that we're making for 2018, which is ideas around the placebo effect. That's the starting point for that, is the theme itself. So yeah, inspiration can come in many different ways, but I suppose there's a kind of through line of an interest in space, really, in the relationship between our bodies and the spaces that we inhabit, whether people are in jam jars or in lots of people in a small space like in On the High Road, or this piece that we're doing with the Austrian New Music Ensemble in the next few years as well, is about kind of personal and private space in relation to musicians and how they practice and rehearse. So yeah, there's kind of through themes around seeing and looking about space.
But it's also true what you said about the performers, because depending on who we get involved at the different stages of developing a piece, definitely does lead it in different directions. Where really, a piece does take a different course if certain people are involved. They're very important to how we make work.
And obviously, in the process of making with an ensemble, and everybody's putting in their creativity into it, the ideas take off from themselves and become something else, which then becomes something else. So it's a very fluid making process, and often we end up with something that we had never really imagined at the beginning. We don't start with a vision for the show. We start with a kind of point of departure and then see where it takes us.
And it's great to have the luxury of two people who've been working together for so long, and you said before, you can have quite an extended period of talking about it before you work on it. But I assume you must have longer to spend on rehearsals than your average scripted show if you're actually developing it with the people that are involved in it, do you?
Well, funnily enough, no, we don't really. Right. I mean, we take things over years, but we do kind of a week of development and then 2 weeks. So, I mean, I suppose
maybe a bit more.
Yeah,
but if you included
it's broken up.
Yeah, and if you included the writing period that a play, for example, would take, it's less than that. But we are doing quite a lot.
Although writing the score is very time-consuming, so I would say there's a lot of work that's happening outside of the rehearsal room, and because we tend to, the last few shows that we've done have involved over 15 people in the cast. In order for us to be able to afford to pay them, basically, we have to be very careful about how we rehearse. So we might rehearse with 3 people for a weekend and then bring together a company of 10 people just to suss out the ideas before we then move into a kind of rehearsal process.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've always worked like that. We've been kind of creative in the way we jigsaw a piece together.
Yeah. People are expensive, aren't they?
They are.
So they should be expensive. They're brilliant, and I wish we could, pay them millions of pounds for their...
So you've been working together since 1995 with Clod Ensemble. That's 22 years. Have you seen the company develop in any particular way since then? Yes,
I mean, it's in so many different ways. I think that in terms of the performances that we make, the process hasn't shifted that much in the way that we work together and work with the company of performers. I think across the whole company, there are other elements of our work that have really grown. I mentioned the performing medicine program earlier. That's a huge part of our work now. We have a bigger kind of infrastructure. But I think within the way we work, Paul still does work for other directors. So he works with Katie Mitchell quite often, does other projects outside the company. Most of the work that I do is based within Clod Ensemble. So it feels consistent the way that we've been working. I suppose we have more. We're lucky enough to have kind of NPO funding agreement and a Wellcome Trust Sustaining Excellence Award now. So that gives us the ability to plan in a way we weren't able to, even 8 years ago. So it feels that there's more of a kind of framework to support our work. But like any arts organisation, the landscape shifts so fast that, whereas, when we started it, we might have been planning, 6 months in advance. Now we can plan 4 years in advance, which is a huge privilege.
Yeah, there's other, that have changed. But what's unusual about us maybe is that rather than sort of starting small and growing in terms of the scale of the productions that we were doing, our very first production, I think, had 15 people in it or something. It was we've always done these quite ambitious pieces. The difference is really the size of the venues. Yeah. Because we had 15 people in the small studio at BAC in London, which I think held 40 people or something. That I would say is just the resources that we have are better.
And also, I suppose the work that we're doing, like back to this kind of idea of space, for me, like working on the Sadler's Wells stage or in the Turbine Hall was a dream. What brilliant stages to work on. Having said that, I think we're very keen to continue to work in lots of different spaces. We recently did a tour of a one-woman show called Red Chair around the Highlands and Islands of Scotland in small theatres and community halls, which was brilliant. And I like this not getting fixed at one scale, but being able to move between them, because each piece demands something different from the environment that it's played in.
And from you as well, presumably.
Yeah.
So this particular show that you're taking to Latitude on the High Road, it's going to develop, and have you got any particular touring plans for it?
Not yet. We're hoping to do it in the spring, but we're not quite sure where or when exactly yet. But we will know soon. So we will keep updates on our website. And
the next opportunity beyond Latitude to see our work will be Under Glass, which is at the Lowry in Manchester, a venue to be confirmed in London in association with Sadler's Wells, and at the Wales Millennium Centre, and that'll be happening in October, November, and also Brighton, I think. Is that to be confirmed as well? So, yes, that will be October, November, and the details will be out there pretty soon, I think.
And then there'll be an opportunity to see on the High Road again, hopefully in the spring, and then another new show, which will happen in the autumn of 2018. So lots of opportunities to see things coming up.
On the High Road Festival Edit will be at Latitude Festival at Henham Park in Southwold, Suffolk, which runs from Thursday the 14th to Sunday the 16th of July 2017. For more information on Latitude Festival, see www.latitudefestival.com, and you can find more about Clod Ensemble at clodensemble.com. You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.